All right, today we're going to dive into a really powerful way to think about and push back against external pressure. We're going to look at coercion not as some big, scary psychological monster, but as a programming problem. And the great thing about programming problems, they have bugs we can identify and solutions we can write. So let's start our debugging session.
I mean, really think about that for a second. The news you're scrolling through, the clothes you're thinking of buying, even the career path you're on. How many of those decisions are 100% you? And how many are, being nudged along by some subtle, constant pull from the outside world? It's a huge question, and it gets right to the heart of who's in control.
And let's be honest, the source of that pull is usually right here, in our hands. Our phones, our social feeds, our emails, they are a nonstop flood of external input. Every notification, every ad, every trending topic, it's like a tiny line of code someone else wrote trying to run on your operating system to change what you do next. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to look at our own invisible code. Then we'll zero in on the main bug we need to fix, something called type coercion. After that, we'll learn how to spot the glitches it causes in real life, and most importantly, how to take back control of your own source code. And we'll wrap up with a single most important idea here. You are the programmer. So let's start at the beginning. What does it actually feel like when your own sense of control starts to fade? When you feel like the steering wheel is slipping out of your hands? It's that weird, unsettling feeling in your gut when your actions just don't line up with what you really want or believe. You feel this strong pull to do something, even though you know it's not the right move for you. That's the moment you stop being the author of your own story and you basically start running a script someone else handed you. Okay, now we get to the heart of our whole analogy. This is the specific bug in the system that lets those outside forces hijack our own behavior, and we're calling it type coercion. So in a lot of programming languages, there's this weird thing that can happen. Let's say you try to add a number like 5 to a piece of text, like the word apples. The system doesn't crash. Instead, it quietly, automatically changes the number 5 into text so it can smush them together. It just assumes it knows what you want to make things run smoothly. Well, that is exactly what happens to us. To make things socially convenient, or maybe to avoid a fight, we let our own intended action, our type, get silently converted into what someone else wants. And once you start looking for it, you see these silent conversions everywhere. An algorithm keeps showing you a certain pair of shoes, and your initial meh gets coerced into I need that. Peer pressure takes your plan to go home and rest and quietly converts it into a yes for a night out you don't even want. And things like manipulative language or guilt tripping, they are masterclasses in taking your solid no and reshaping it into a shaky, reluctant, I guess so. Let's just take peer pressure. It's the classic example of this bug running wild. As humans, we have this deep, powerful need to belong. Coercers exploit that. They make you feel like your spot in the group is on the line unless you change your behavior. See? That's the type coercion right there. Your original value, let's call it self-care, gets silently converted into their desired value, group conformity. So what's the end result of all this unwanted type coercion running in our system? Well, in programming, it causes bizarre, illogical outcomes. In life, it leads to what we can call falsy states. Think of these as the emotional error messages telling you that your own internal logic is being broken and you're losing power. And check this out. The parallels between code and our feelings are kind of eerie, right? When someone just ignores your input, making you feel totally invisible, that's the emotional equivalent of a null or undefined value in code. When they hit you with a, you're just being dramatic, or that never happened, they are literally asserting false over your own reality. And when you get stuck in some crazy making argument that goes in circles, that feeling of total confusion is NaN, not a number. Your brain can't compute it because the logic isn't there. Okay, so now we understand the bug and the error messages it spits out. So let's get practical. Let's move to the next phase of our debugging, spotting these glitches as they're happening, out in the real world. Yeah. Here's the tricky part. Coercion doesn't usually show up with a big flashing sign. It's sneaky. It often comes disguised as concern, or logic, or even love. You have to learn to be a detective, to look for those little inconsistencies, the subtle signals that tell you the system isn't running properly. And these are your best diagnostic tools. That gut feeling, that's your system's built-in antivirus scanner, screaming that it's detected malware. Feeling anxious or guilty after talking to someone? That's like a performance warning. Your emotional RAM is getting maxed out.
Acting out of character means some unauthorized program is running in the background. And when you're only getting one side of the story, that's a firewall, and it's blocking you from getting the data you need to make a good call. Okay, get ready, because this is probably the most fascinating and bizarre part of this whole analogy. In the programming language JavaScript, this statement you see here, which basically says an empty thing is equal to not an empty thing, can actually evaluate as true. It makes no logical sense, but it happens because of something called loose equality, where the system will bend over backwards, aggressively changing types on both sides just to force a match. It literally twists reality to get an outcome. And that is a perfect technical metaphor for gaslighting. So how does this insane code logic show up in real life? Oh, you've seen it. A promise was definitely made, but now it's forgotten. The terms you both agreed to are suddenly reinterpreted to mean the exact opposite. In both situations, just like in that line of code, A is suddenly being treated as equal to not A. And the most toxic version, of course, is gaslighting, where someone makes you believe that your memory is the bug, that your perception of reality is what's broken, not their manipulation. All right, this is the big pivot point. Now that we can spot the bug, we can start to patch it. It's time to reclaim your own source code. Just seeing the problem, just being aware that this is happening, that's huge. That gives you so much power. But true freedom, that comes from taking action, from actively putting in the fix that stops the bug from running your life. It's all about breaking free from that automatic, coerced compliance. And what's so cool is that the solution comes straight from the world of good, clean programming. See, to stop that unwanted type coercion, good programmers use something called explicit conversion. They don't let the system guess. They write specific code that says, hey, treat this value as a number, or no, this is a string. For us, that override function is simply a conscious, deliberate choice. It's hitting pause on the automatic process and declaring our own intent. And here's how you put that into practice. It's a simple 3-step process. First, just pause. This is you setting a breakpoint in their code. It stops the whole coercive script from running automatically. Second, define your values. Your values are your original source code. Know what they are. Are you an honesty type, a family first type, a mental health type? And third, choose your response. The person trying to coerce you wants you to think there's only one right answer, theirs. But there are always other options. When you consciously choose, you are explicitly converting the situation back to your own terms. So all of this brings us to the final and, honestly, the most empowering principle in this entire framework. It's the core belief that really lets you resist any and all coercion. Think about it. In a computer program, a variable is just a placeholder, a container. It can be changed, overwritten, redefined by any other part of the code, whenever. But you are not a variable. This is where the analogy finally breaks down and your humanity kicks in. You have the unique, incredible power to define yourself. No outside script can fundamentally change who you are unless you let it. At the end of the day, when you start to see coercion for what it is, a buggy, flawed system, it loses its power over you. You stop being a passive variable that gets pushed around, and you become the active programmer. So the real question isn't if your choices are your own anymore. The question is, what code are you going to write today?